this very place in 1836. I vividly recall the history of this land and welcome you all to rekindle the saga and legend of those glorious days once again. Yes, indeed, this beautiful land was brought into the folds of the Indian subcontinent by the great benefactor of the Sikh, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, through the bold and daring expeditions led by his general, Zorawar Singh. But before I take you into the history, let me first lead you through the geographical landmarks of this region. Ladakh is made up of Leh, Kargil, Nubra, Baltistan, Zanskar, and Lahore Spiti. It lies to the west of Tibet, bounded by daunting mountain ranges, the Great Himalayas in the southwest, and Karakoram Range beyond the Nubra Valley in the northeast. The mighty Indus is omnipresent, flowing between the Zanskar mountain range on its southern side and the Ladakh range on its northern side. Leh, its capital, is situated at 11,480 feet above sea level on the northern bank of the mighty Indus River at the crossroads of valleys. There is the Suru Valley and the famous Kargil Hill feature in the west. The Turtuk and Nubra valleys descend to the north. Pangong Sore and the plateau of Chumphang are located to the east, in the Neoma subdivision of Ladakh. The road to the famous tourism and adventure spot of Manali goes past the Sogoriri Lake towards the south. The Nubra Valley is popularly known as Ladumra, meaning Valley of Flowers. It has an average altitude of 10,000 feet above sea level. To reach Nubra Valley, one has to cross Khardungwa, located at 18,380 feet altitude, and is the highest motorable road in the world. Nubra Valley is famous for the double-humped camel, a legacy from the Central Asian trade caravans. Further upstream rests the Siachen Glacier, the famous Brakbar tribal community, believed to be descendants of the lost Aryan tribe, reside along the steep banks of the Indus River. While the terrain is certainly treacherous, the most ominous and portentous is the Ladakh weather. Temperatures in the region can reach -20 degrees and even lower in the higher reaches. The winds are strong and the weather changes quite unpredictably. All this makes mere survival a challenge by itself, more dreaded than fighting the enemy. To motivate men to follow into battle under such hazardous conditions is not for a faint-hearted leader. General Zorawar, the great warrior, was certainly courageous beyond exception. The history of Ladakh, of about a century before the advent of Zorawar on the scene in 1834, is replete with frequent invasions from outsiders and local battles between Ladakh and Baltistan chieftains. It was the order of those times to wrest territorial control by force, to expand trade and revenue. Invaders came in hordes to loot and plunder. First, it was the Afghans from the far west who took charge of the area, bringing with them the Muslim religion. They were followed by the Europeans who brought in Christianity, though they could not make much impact. The Tibetans also made some incursion. Finally, the area reverted to the influence of the Balti. Within, Buddhism came back with greater acceptance. They also brought in the Balti language. Both the Balti and Buddhism have by and large become the most entwined in the culture of the region. All this was before Zorawar swept through these ranges with his Dogra and Sikh soldiers in 1834-80 and established a garrison of 300 soldiers in Mai Crescent in 1836-80. 1803, at the early age of 17, in a twist of fate, young Zorawar Singh was spotted by Rana Jaswant Singh, a Jagirdar of Gillihan, who was greatly impressed by his tall, imposing frame of 6 feet and 4 inches. Sensing a great future for the young Zorawar and himself, Jaswant Singh took him to Galihan, now known as Doda, near Jammu, and trained him to be a soldier. Zorawar then joined service under Gulab Singh Dogra, who initially employed him mostly for defending the forts to the north of Jammu. For some time, he also worked as an inspector of supplies, where he displayed his acumen for administration, effecting a saving in the scarce provisions for the garrisons. In 1820 AD, Gulab Singh captured Keshwar and was appointed governor of Keshwar by Maharaja Ranjit Singh. He in turn appointed Zorawar Singh to administer the new district, awarding him the title of Wazir. But Zorawar was a man of his own destiny. He harbored warlike ambitions of expansion of his jurisdiction. He led 4 perilous expeditions into Ladakh. In the summer of 1834, on sensing great internal unrest in Ladakh, he marched in with 5,000 soldiers from Keshwar. Bone-chilling sub-zero temperatures through harsh terrain would not deter him. He chose to march from southwest to northeast across the Zanskar range, crossing through the Sum Valley at 14,700 feet, covering a distance of 336 miles via Sur. His army had matchlocks, swords, and artillery pieces carried on mules. During the invasion, Zorawar Singh and his army had to face stiff resistance from the Ladakhis, but the disciplined army under General Zorawar Singh conquered and annexed the territory. After fighting pitched battles at places such as Sanku, Lankatse, Kanse, Sot, and Pashkam, the invaders pushed on to Leh. The Ladakhi king, Sepal Namgyal, was made to pay war indemnity. This was the first foray of Zorawar in the series that were to follow into Ladakh. No sooner Zorawar returned, the king refused to pay the tribute to Gulab Singh. A rebellion started to brew. Zorawar Singh responded with due urgency and quickly mustered his troops. Winter had set in, but the rebellion had to be crushed. Crossing the Zanskar posed a momentous challenge, but Zorawar was not the one to be deterred. He advanced swiftly through the short but difficult Keshwar-Zanskar route, traversing 275 grueling miles of treacherous terrain, and reached near Leh in just 10 days, taking his vassals by surprise. He quelled the rebellion, deposed the old king, and appointed his prime minister and brother-in-law, Nagaraj Tanzin, as the new ruler of Ladakh. It was during this period in 1836 that Zorawar decided to build a fort at Leh, and I was born. The high ground where I stand now was selected. A perimeter moat and wall was built. A temple and a mosque were also constructed inside. Once I was ready, a massive celebration was held. Fireworks reverberated in Leh to mark the occasion. Zorawar had personally supervised my construction. That is why I do not bear any resemblance to the buildings in the area. My first floor was built to house the soldiers and officers. The second catered for the watchtowers, and the ground floor housed the ammunition, military stores, and pack animals. Soon, a vibrant city began to rise outside their perimeter, with the accompanying hustle and bustle. The locals were very happy, and many a tear was shed when Zorawar left to return to Jammu. But the Ladakhi chieftains were a stubborn lot, especially when it concerned their land and pride. Each time that Zorawar left Leh, they grew restless. This time again, rebellion grew under Nagarab's dancing. When Zorawar learned of this, he started on his third expedition into Ladakh. It was November of 1837 AD, and winter was at its peak. But as was his wont, nothing would stop the valiant Zorawar. He crossed the Zanskar at 19,000 feet, braving all odds. The cold was so severe that 25 soldiers were lost, and many lost their fingers and toes to frostbite. Unnerved, the resolute Zorawar Singh pushed ahead, reaching earlier than expected, causing great consternation to the rebelling forces.
Can't imagine! Yes! He's reached here in just 10 days from Kishkar.
I will not tolerate rebellion. Go and crush it and put the house in order. Remove Nagarab Stanzan and replace him with a trustworthy leader. In May 1838, Zorawar returned to Kishtwar, but he had to make 2 more incursions before the entire Ladakh region could be annexed to the Sikh kingdom in 1848. Soon after crushing the rebellion, in the same year, 1839 AD, Zorawar attacked Baltistan, a Mohammedan principality in the Indus Valley to the northwest of Kargil. Baltistan at that time had no standing or regular army to confront the highly trained and tactically sound army of Zorawar. To reach its capital Kargil, Zorawar had to cross the Indus River. Ahmed Shah the ruler had destroyed the bridge over the river near Mount. Zorawar's army plodded relentlessly along the east bank of the river for 25 grueling days, over snow-capped mountains, deep abysses, and deadly gorges, looking for a suitable crossing place. Rations were running low, and the cold taking its toll, but the gods were in favor. Soon they found a narrow crossing, enough to lay a bridge over the Indus. Thus, overcoming high mountains, impassable frozen rivers, cold and starvation, the general surprised the defenders. He laid a 15-day siege on Skardu Fort. On the 15th day and dark night, Zorawar crossed over the highest dominating hill feature of the area from its most impossible ridge, in freezing and gusty wind conditions, assaulted the fort and forced the Baltis to surrender. Having defeated the Baltis, Zorawar deposed Ahmed Shah and installed his eldest son, Muhammad Shah, as the new king of Baltistan. Thus in 1840, Baltistan too lost independence and came under the control of Raja Gulab Singh. Zorawar Singh next turned his attention towards western Tibet. The conquest of Tibet was an ambition he had harbored in his heart for some time. He suggested to Maharaja Ranjit Singh that he was ready to kindle the fires of fighting, and by the grace of ever-triumphant glory of the Maharaja, he would take possession of Tibet. The wise Maharaja, however, was not willing to allow him to undertake the adventure against a new enemy at that time. though he knew it would open another route to Nepal. Zorawar Singh had his charms during the reign of Ranjit Singh's successor, Maharaja Sher Singh, in April 1841, by which time the conquest of Ladakh had been completed. He marched into Tibet at the head of a large army. For this expedition for Tibet, Zorawar recruited Ladakhis and Baltis with few Sherpa Dobras. This force had very little of Sikh soldiers. All these factors were to ultimately prove costly. He had collected a 5,000-strong force at Leh, from where he commenced his advance in May 1841 towards western Tibet and entered Tibet near Tashigong up the Indus River. His attack plan for the capture of western Tibet was three-pronged. One column of army was under the command of Gulab Khan, the second under Noor Sulam, and the third column was under the command of Zorawar Singh himself, following the route south of Pangong Lake. He captured Rudol towards the middle of 1841 and then Gartor. Rudol is towards the north of Tashigong and Gartor is towards east, just on the top of Kojarnath Pass in the north, west corner of Nepal, from where people enter into Nepal from Tibet. So Maharaja Ranjit Singh's dream of establishing land route with Nepal, bypassing occupied India, was realized. But Zorawar had extended his communication and supply line over 450 miles of inhospitable terrain, building small forts and pickets along the way. In the month of August 1841, the two opposing forces met across the Mayun Pass. In the fight, both sides suffered heavy casualties, but the Tibetan could not withstand Zorawar's onslaught and fled towards Taklakot. After some feeble resistance in September 1841, within 6 months, Zorawar's forces had overrun the territories to the northwest of the Mayun Pass and taken possession of Taklakot. Zorawar's conquest of western Tibet was now complete. He built the Fort Chitang near Taklakot and put Mehta Basti Ram in command of 500 men there, with 8 or 9 cannons. At Tibet, his first action was to take holy bath in the Zorawar Lake. He also offered a gold idol at the holiest of holy Mount Kailash and prayed for those who had made the supreme sacrifice for this venture. However, the general was not allowed to reap the fruits of their new conquests in western Tibet. The ambitious Zorawar had overstretched his logistics and also weakened his force by leaving behind small pickets in the captured areas. Making matters worse, winter had set in and the heavy snowfall had closed the Mayun Pass, preventing reinforcements reaching him from Leh or from any other place in his army. Making matters difficult was a rarefied atmosphere at 15,000 feet above sea level. It was taking its toll on his troops despite their training and acclimatization. Zorawar's forces had also been reduced to about 3,000 men only. The Tibetans and their Chinese allies regrouped. Lhasa rushed in reinforcement of over 10,000 strong Tibetan army to General Pishi. With this large force, Pishi advanced to give battle by passing the Dogra fort of Chitang. badly outnumbered, the great warrior Zorawar was not to lose heart. He divided his available force into several detachments to counter-attack the Tibetans in waves. Zorawar and his men met the Tibetan army at the Battle of Toyo in the vicinity of Lake Zorawar in the second week of December at an altitude of 13,000 feet. The battle continued for 3 days. On the 12th of December 1841, Zorawar Singh was hit on the right shoulder by a silver bullet, which had been specially made for him. But he was not done yet. Clutching the sword in his right hand, he put to death many of his enemies, although badly wounded. Realized that it would be impossible to capture him alive. So in the ensuing melee, a Tibetan horseman lanced him, and then others feared the mighty Zorawar. The redoubtable warrior, General Zorawar Singh, was thus martyred on the 12th of December 1841 in the vicinity of Kot, sword in hand, invoking awe and rare unqualified respect from friends and foe alike. Although this great conqueror perished in the midst of his campaign, his initiative did not go unrewarded. In September 1842, a treaty was signed by representatives of Chinese and Lhasa governments on the one hand, and of Khalsa Darbar and Gulab Singh on the other, which extended the Sikh and hence the Indian frontiers to their present international boundary. The whole of Ladakh thus became a part of the Indian territory. Zorawar had not only etched his name in the history of India, he had single-handedly added 50,000 square miles of territory to the northern frontiers of the country. Historians and thinkers also suggest that the additional territory provides the much-needed strategic depth to our northern borders. Most importantly, therefore, the great Himalayan region, with its mighty glaciers, provide a natural wall to our defense in the north, which is attributable to the vision and exploits of one of the greatest sons of the soil, General Zorawar Singh. Before we bid adieu, it fills my heart with pride to tell you that a memorial in the shape of a chortan or samadhi was constructed by the Tibetans at the place where General Zorawar Singh fell, where his remains have been immortalized in order to perpetuate the memory of association of the great warrior and administrator with Tibet. This is a matter of unique honor, as nowhere in the history of the world has it happened that a memorial stands erected by the victors as a tribute for their gallant adversity. Jai Hind.